know that we all have our favorite Sherman Brothers tunes, but perhaps they are best known for their music from Disney's 1964 feature film, Mary Poppins, for which they won Academy Awards for both Best Score and Best Song. 40 years later, a new generation was introduced to this magical music when the Sherman Brothers collaborated with Disney Theatrical Productions on a brand new stage production of Mary Poppins. And here to tell us more about that practically perfect partnership is producer and president of Disney Theatrical Productions, Thomas Schumacher.
Could this be any more fantastic? I love how they've arranged the weather for us, these extraordinary performers they brought out for us, this fantastic band. I also just have to tell you that sitting in the front row today is Mrs. Richard Sherman, Elizabeth Sherman, who for us on Broadway is always in the front row. If you're very, 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 very lucky, every so often in your lifetime, you have a chance to stand in the shadow of greatness. And that's what it is to work with the Sherman Brothers. They are part of our family, not just our Disney family, but our collective family and our personal families. I'm convinced that the Sherman Brothers are now embedded deep in our collective DNA. And if you grew up in, if you were born in the last half of the 20th century, you were raised by the Sherman Brothers. They educated you, they delighted you, they entertained you, they enlightened you. Now, I first saw the Sherman Brothers work in Mary Poppins, and I know shockingly, was there at the premiere engagement at Grauman's Chinese Theater on Hollywood Boulevard. And on the way home from seeing this film, all the way, I sang to myself, "Feed the Birds." Now, granted, this is a peculiar tune for a young boy to pick up out of this movie. My sisters were in the front seat belting out Jolly Holiday and what have you. But I was wrapped in ennui in the back seat of my car, thinking about this single act of kindness. Well, who would have thought that that day would lead many, 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 many years later to the extraordinary chance to partner with the legendary Sir Cameron Mackintosh to bring Mary Poppins to the West End and to Broadway. And that actually began with my pal and many-time collaborator, Jeff Curdy, who took me to meet Richard Sherman. And you know, how could I say no? It was going to be lunch at the Polo Lounge at the Beverly Hills Hotel. The most glamorous place I could think. And of course, just right down the street from the Sherman house. And I sat there and I said, "So what do you think? Poppins on Broadway?" Well, if you don't know Richard, he's got this sort of legendary smile that starts at this ear and wraps all the way to this ear. And the smile starts, and then a little tear forms in the corner of his eye. I thought, oh, he thinks it's a good idea. Now, many people say, what is it that makes a Sherman Brothers song? And I think it's got a number of factors. One is, it touches you in the heart. And then, it touches you in the mind. But it sounds like an old friend the first time you hear it. But also with the Shermans, they come from truth and they come from surprise. And these two elements blend together in a classic Sherman Brothers song. For example, used to be, if you wanted to insult someone, you said, "Hey, go fly a kite." But the Shermans turn it into a celebration. Now, one thing many people do not know about Richard and Robert Sherman is that they're actually the sons of a great songwriter in his own right, Al Sherman. And you know the music of Al Sherman, you just don't know. You got to be a football hero. You hear this every Sunday, all football season long. So these boys growing up in Beverly Hills with a father who's a songwriter. Well, the story goes that Al Sherman knew his way around a kite. And not just the store-bought kind. And when the mood was right, when the wind was up, and when the boys needed a little lift, Al Sherman would take his sons for a day of kite flying. Now that has a payoff to it. Because when the Sherman Brothers are conceiving this moment for Mary Poppins, how do they say George Banks loves Michael and Jane Banks? He takes them to fly a kite. Let's go fly a kite. That's a classic Sherman Brothers thing. Take an element of truth from their life, turn it on its head, surprise you with it, and create an event. Well, we actually, having talked to Richard about this, restructured it in Mary Poppins and put it right in the middle of the show. So a big centerpiece in the show is the song Let's Go Fly a Kite, and we built much of the story around this idea of a father who takes his kids out to fly a kite. The talent to create the song, the inspiration to put it there. Richard Sherman has been an inspiration, a friend, a guiding light, and a great, great supporter of our show, and a joy at every level to collaborate with. And so, what a fitting tribute that we get to gather here to celebrate two guys who bring so much happiness to the world in a place that has spun out happiness all over the world. And I'm so honored and delighted and tickled to you, my dear friend, that you got this to happen. Bravo. Now, I have one more job to do before I go, which is to introduce someone who has indeed seen it all. Now, that's not hyperbole in the case of Marty Sklar, because he actually started working here in this park a month before it even opened. His career at Disney, which he alleges to have retired from last July, and there's not a person here who's buying that for a minute. His career rose to such heights as a leader, as a man who was able to guide people, but he holds a distinction no one else has. Marty Sklar participated in the opening of all 11 Disney parks around the world. It's an extraordinary thing. His window is on the City Hall over there. For generations of us who grew up working here under Marty, they know him as a guru, they know him as a shepherd, and they also know him as a man who always let his conscience be his guide. This is a friend of Richard and Robert. This is Marty Sklar.